talk about, and I will turn it over to our city manager, Mr. Sanders.
Good morning, Mayor and council members, general public, and staff. Thank you. This morning we have two presentations. We're going to start off with analysis of impediments to housing. And so I think Jody gets to kick us off as well. Thank you, Jody.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much.
Good morning. Good morning, Mayor Bozen, council members. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today concerning the analysis of impediments to fair housing. My name is Jody Jersvik, and I'm the Affordable Housing Programs Manager in Neighborhood Services. And I'm here to present the findings and goals that we've outlined in the 2024 analysis of impediments to fair housing. In this presentation, I will present an overview of the analysis of impediments. Following my segment, Eric Chatham, our consultant from Civitas, will give a presentation on the consolidated plan. The 2024 analysis of impediments covers the period from 2025 through 2029, and it was prepared in collaboration with the Des Moines Municipal Housing Agency, City of West Des Moines, and Polk County. HUD grantees affirmed their commitment to furthering fair housing as part of their 5-year consolidated plan for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And the analysis of impediments is on the City Council agenda this evening for approval. The analysis examined barriers to fair housing for the 6-county CBSA region that includes Dallas, Jasper, Guthrie, Madison, Warren, and Polk counties. This regional approach enabled us to take a broader view of barriers to fair housing by addressing both local and regional housing challenges. The committee included representatives from local and regional agencies and organizations connected with the City of Des Moines, City of West Des Moines, Polk County, and the Des Moines Municipal Housing Agency. Collaborating entities on the steering committee included the Polk County Housing Trust Fund, Homeward, Des Moines Area Regional Transit, Mid-Iowa Health Foundation, Evelyn K. Davis Center, Des Moines Civil Human Rights, Des Moines Municipal Organization, and the West Des Moines Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office, and United Way. We'd like to extend our gratitude to the steering committee for their guidance and expertise on the 2024 analysis of impediments. As recipients of federal funding, we are committed to promoting fair housing principles. This involves taking proactive steps to address barriers to housing choices, working to eliminate segregation, and fostering inclusive communities for protected classes and households with lower incomes. The protected classes covered by fair housing laws, the U.S. Fair Housing Act, the Iowa Civil Rights Act, and the Des Moines Municipal Code include race, color, national origin, creed, age, ancestry, religion, sex, including gender identity and sexual orientation, familial status, and disability. Several interconnected factors perpetuate barriers to fair housing access. The first one is segregation of racially or ethnically concentrated poverty, limiting access to resources and exacerbating social and economic disparities. The second is disparities in access to opportunity. These include factors such as inadequate transportation, insufficient public infrastructure, housing problems, and other housing disparities. Disproportionate housing needs include inadequate housing options, overcrowding, and homelessness. The report identifies key findings related to barriers to fair housing choice. The first finding is that disparate housing impacts for protected classes. Housing problems disproportionately impact specific demographics, particularly persons of color and low-income households in neighborhoods surrounding downtown Des Moines. More than 1/3 of the households in Des Moines face at least one of 4 housing problems, those being lack of a complete kitchen, lack of plumbing facilities, overcrowding, and the most prevalent one, cost burden. Those most affected by housing issues in Des Moines are people of color. The second finding is that economic barriers identified in the 2019 analysis of impediments continue to be problems within housing finance and access to finance resources today, even with the substantial work being completed in this area in our community. The third key finding relates to geographic and structural barriers that impact where individuals and families can live and work and thrive. Across all demographic categories, Des Moines residents are more likely to live in neighborhoods affected by poverty. Black non-Hispanic residents in Des Moines are most likely to live in poverty, but regionally white residents are the least likely to live in neighborhoods affected by poverty. The fourth finding is the need for continued education or continued reduction in inequities in housing finance and lending. Nonprofit organizations play a critical role in bridging gaps in housing finance and lending. Programs and initiatives through our nonprofit partners, such as Neighborhood Finance Corporation, Home Inc., and Habitat for Humanity, provide vital support through down payment assistance programs, subsidies, and education. They empower vulnerable populations through education and counseling, resources, and they help individuals navigate traditional lending channels. However, demand for their services exceeds their current capacity. The fifth finding is limited awareness of fair housing laws or access to legal resources to fight discrimination. Many underserved populations are often unaware of their rights under fair housing laws, which protect against discrimination. The sixth finding is community resistance, which is often fueled by stereotypes and prejudices, and significantly hinders construction of affordable housing. This resistance is also referred to as NIMBY, not in my backyard, occurs when residents oppose affordable housing initiatives, fearing negative impacts on their community's character, property values, and safety. And last, racial and socioeconomic segregation continues to be a significant challenge that leads to unequal access to affordable housing. High rental and poverty rates are concentrated in older neighborhoods surrounding downtown Des Moines. Segregation is evident in racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty where a disproportionately high percentage of the non-white population coincides with significant poverty levels. I will now start to present the 9 goals of the analysis of impediments, and for each one, we've selected a strategy to provide an example of what we want to achieve with that goal. The goals in the analysis of impediments are intended to supplement and support the critical work of our nonprofit partners. However, the need in our community is greater than their capacity, as I stated earlier. The first goal is intended to advance equity through education on fair housing rights for tenants, landlords, boards, commissions, and city-county staff through the Des Moines Civil and Human Rights Division. Many residents are unaware of their housing rights or don't know how to seek recourse if those rights are violated. To help address this issue, the Des Moines Civil and Human Rights Department, in collaboration with the Des Moines and West Des Moines Police Department, offer a 60-minute landlord training session twice a year. This training aims to educate landlords about fair housing laws and promote compliance, ensuring all individuals have access to rights in housing. One idea brought forward during the public comment period was to collaborate with other entities, private entities in the community who also provide this, one of those being the Greater Iowa Apartment Association, who actually provides fair housing counseling. And they did indicate that they were interested in collaborating with our fair housing training, and the result of that would be an increased capacity in the amount of training that could be provided within the community. One strategy supported by the steering committee is to make that training a requirement for rental licensing, and those partnerships to expand those class offerings could help do that. The second goal that we identified and the steering committee supported was to collaborate with program partners to strengthen home ownership education and support through counseling and education. For instance, Home Inc. is one of several providers of tenant and homebuyer educational offerings. Already, they educate and counsel renters, tenants, and landlords throughout Iowa to understand their housing rights and responsibilities. One strategy supported by the steering committee is for Home Inc. to develop a HUD post-purchase delinquency program to support housing stability for low-income homeowners. This was an original goal, and it just so happened that I had a conversation with Carrie Waterman, the executive director of Home Inc., and she happened to have this as a goal of hers. And so it was just one of those great situations when a goal that was communicated out in the community as needed was actually already being planned by one of our nonprofit providers. In addition, Home Inc. wants to create a library of targeted workshops focused on topics that can put families at risk of losing their homes, such as homeowners insurance, preventative and seasonal maintenance, and long-term improvements to a home. The third goal is to promote preservation of affordable housing in areas that enhance quality of life and consider the needs of protected classes. This report highlights the shortage of affordable housing for low and moderate income households in high opportunity areas. Our nonprofit partners, Habitat for Humanity, Home Inc., work to increase the availability of affordable single-family homes. They receive city home funds to support new construction or renovation of homes, which are then sold to income-qualified home buyers. Neighborhood Finance Corporation promotes equitable homeownership and preserves affordable housing through its lending, educational, and other programs. One strategy supported by the steering committee was to develop, and the city, was to develop a community land trust to provide safe, healthy, and affordable homes for income-qualified buyers. This initiative will require strong collaboration with nonprofit housing partners, including Habitat for Humanity, Home Inc., and NFC, and many more, through their home ownership programs to ensure successful implementation. Goal 4 is to promote development and preservation of affordable housing, addressing the needs of protected classes. A key component of the report emphasizes the need to incentivize the construction and renovation of housing that is accessible for people with disabilities. Currently, there are significant gaps in the availability of housing that meets the accessible needs of these individuals. One strategy is prioritizing universal design and enhanced accessibility in housing projects. Funding preferences could be given to projects that exceed basic accessibility standards, encouraging the development of additional safe, affordable, and accessible rental housing options. Goal 5 is to support more service-enriched housing models. These strategies, supported by the steering committee, include increasing permanent housing options for chronically homeless individuals, those experiencing episodic homelessness, and other at-risk populations. One example is Anawim's Monarch Project, which involves converting the former Days Inn on Merle Hay Road into housing for individuals experiencing homelessness and who also have disabilities. This project will provide residents not only with housing, but also access to essential supportive services. Goal 6 is to implement local government policies to encourage social equity and to mitigate disparate impacts. This goal was carried forward from the 2019 analysis of impediments at the request of the steering committee. The strategy is to monitor and to work to reduce housing choice voucher return rates when they exceed 20%, as tracked by the housing agency. The goal is actually to lower this rate of return to 10%, but there are many obstacles in the way and out of the control of the housing agency to make an impact on that reduction. There are things that can be done to improve the process, but those require activity at the federal level to make impact on the Section 8 program to allow some of those streamlined functionalities to be placed into practice. Another strategy is to establish a housing navigator role within a nonprofit. The housing navigator role would support households in navigating housing options, services, and resources. This position could provide personalized guidance to secure stable housing by understanding each client's needs. And the last 3 goals, Goal 7, to improve communication and representation to reflect the diversity of the community. One strategy of the steering committee that the steering committee supported is to identify and research new technology, evaluate current translation efforts to improve communication across access and stay updated on trends and community needs. In addition, the goals include a strategy to develop a communication plan with best practices for engaging diverse populations and addressing language barriers, including non-traditional communication outlets that could include the language access policy that the city that became effective in the city on December 1st of 2023. I'll also state that this is another one of those goals that Home Inc. had also identified as a potential activity. Goal 8 is addressing zoning, city codes, and policies that limit housing choices. One strategy supported by the steering committee is to draft and implement an inclusionary housing policy, while also encouraging neighbor communities to do the same. This includes negotiating with developers for set-asides based on AMI. Another strategy supported by the steering committee seeks to strengthen regional collaboration within neighboring cities and counties to address housing challenges on a broader scale. Working together helps avoid fragmented solutions and ensures that we're building a cohesive plan that improves housing across the board. And the final goal, to promote current and new research for creative financing or ownership tools. This goal is supported by the steering committee, and it's focused on innovation in finance and home ownership models. The focus is on promoting existing programs that offer financial education and assistance to protected classes, vulnerable populations, and low-income households. One program is the Neighborhood Finance Corporation's Journey to Home Ownership, which specifically supports African Americans seeking to become homeowners. One strategy supported by the steering committee is to host home ownership events for underserved communities. I heard one of these. Amina Jones made a pitch for her idea for a home ownership event at the 2024 IFA conference and the Innovation Awards. She had already held one of these home ownership events. She partnered with local lenders, realtors, insurance agents, government agencies, and nonprofit housing service providers to offer information and guidance on the home buying process. The event aimed at creating pathways to home ownership, particularly for underserved populations, and featured educational workshops and resources, introduced real estate investing and career opportunities in the industry, and connected attendees with professionals in real estate, inspection, lending, and appraisal to equip them with essential knowledge for the home ownership journey. And she is interested in putting on another one and is working at that now. My last slide is in conclusion. The 2024 analysis of impediments to fair housing reflects where we stand today, showing us the barriers that continue to prevent equal housing opportunities for all residents. The goals we've outlined are essential steps towards building a more inclusive city. As we work toward achieving these goals, it is our intent to partner with stakeholder organizations in the community and regionally, share out our successes in the community so they know what accomplishments have been done, stay in touch with the community through continuous outreach so we can begin working towards the next 5-year analysis of impediments, or whatever that looks like, and use the goals to inform and direct our work. This analysis is vital for ensuring all residents of Des Moines have access to safe and affordable housing. It reinforces our commitment to equity and inclusivity in housing practices. And I thank you for your time today.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
So on the goal number 1,
Yep.
About education
Mhm.
through fair housing, I sat in on one of the police department crime-free, multi-family housing
Yes.
workshop, and it seemed like just the crowd were large apartment complexes, the usual suspects,
Mm-hmm.
trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get to the landlords that just have a property, several small properties? Do you have a sense of where the major issues are coming from the
They are
managers of larger complexes, or more it's a person that has 1 or 2 rental homes?
I would say from what I've heard that the problem does tend to originate from those smaller landlords, that there are the large landlords that are members of different apartment associations. Those have certain standards that they want them to follow. They do encourage that fair housing training through
Sure.
their associations. It is a smaller population of people. I think landlords, especially in some of the homes that perhaps need more work to be done to make them more safe and livable. One of the things about the fair housing training that is done through the police department is that it is currently optional. And one piece that we could incentivize or is to make it required and perhaps tie it to rental licensing. And if that were to happen, could there be some type of an adjustment in the rental licensing time period if they're taking these certain steps to complete adequate training? So that was one thing that kind of got popped around, is instead of it being voluntary, we have the same kind of population of landlords participating in that voluntary training. We need to not capture literally, but we need to try to encourage those other landlords who are not currently doing that to participate in that. You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Uh,
Do you have one?
Well, I'm just curious with a report like this. I mean, there are a number of sub-goals
Yes.
and in some cases, policy changes identified that we didn't even discuss here, but we are adopting this as our plan. So my question is how do we follow up on these various recommendations? What are next steps so that a plan like this, we don't go another 5 years and
Right.
Right.
Correct. The plan is to reach out to stakeholders. Now, some of the items in the goals were carried forward from a prior year. They were either carried forward because they were important and needed to continue. We weren't maybe fully accomplished with what needed to be done, or we wanted to pull it forward to track, such as the housing choice vouchers. There are some that are already a part of an annual process at the housing agency to review those. Those happen automatically, and we want to seek to encourage deeper dives into that perhaps, but that work is already being accomplished, and we want to report that out to the community when it happens. There are some of the goals that are already being planned. Serendipity, Home Inc. is one of them, where we had identified that, and then Home Inc. came forward and said they were already planning on doing that. Then the rest is reaching myself, individuals in neighborhood services, working with stakeholders out in the industry to try to find out what kind of partnerships we can create. And some of those partnerships can be created just as we begin working with, and I'll bring up the Community Land Trust and all the partnering that's going to have to go there, working with all of those partners and just keeping these in the forefront of our thoughts as we work toward these things, and the conversations in the community, looking for those policy open windows to address certain things, but bringing these to the attention of the individuals in our community, the nonprofits, and to share these broadly.
I mean, I guess I have questions about working across departments. So for example, there are some of these that promoting universal design.
Yes.
And I assume this plan was in the works for quite some time. Something like that should be a conversation and part of our abatement discussion, for example, and part of our TIF discussions.
Okay.
And how do we make sure that connection is made? That's, I think, kind of an easy place where we can start having conversations about universal design. And then there's a whole section that talks about changes to our zoning code. And my question is how does something like that come back to us? I mean, the partnership piece is nice, but as a body, we're adopting this, and then we go essentially 5 years without maybe discussing it. I'd like to see us figure out ways that we actually maybe get some regular reporting on a report like this and track what we're actually doing.
Absolutely. I agree with that. That would be my responsibility to track the progress and to report out that progress and to initiate those stakeholder conversations either within the city or external to the city, conversations with other departments, OED, Development Services, Neighborhood Inspections Division, ION, anybody that has that connection to these goals. I did have reviews done by Mike Ludwig concerning the Development Services direct goals that impacted that department. And so I think that
If I could, Mayor.
Yeah, if you want.
If I could add, Jody, just real
yes,
quick,
please.
that
Yes.
need to make sure we understand that this is the analysis of the impediments that have been found. And so these results are meant to influence the actual plans that are developed in the departments and actually regionally with our other partners from outside of Des Moines. And so I think what's crucial is that as we bring forward plans like the housing plan that's under works right now, and annual plans, a consolidated plan that we're going to hear about, that we talk through what elements of the impediments are being included in those plans and being addressed. This is not meant to be a plan in and of itself, but guidance into what impediments are going to need to be addressed through other plans, if that's a fair.
That's a fair statement, yes.
And even just policies as the housing agency, as civil and human rights, as our equity teams are working on some of these impediments.
I mean, that's a little bit confusing to me. I mean, because I looked at the report. It's a 200-page report, right? But the piece that I was focused on, I mean, there are recommendations that come out of that analysis, right? I mean, that's the piece that I'm talking about, and that's what we're adopting. If we weren't meant to set goals and to try and reach those goals, why are they included in the report at all then?
But you'll notice that those recommendations, for quite a few of those, call for other agencies, other groups to implement, right? And so
some of them do, right?
Right.
Certainly, but a number of them are within our control.
Right, but again, it should be guiding development services to be looking at the zoning aspects, the housing agency to be looking at some of the impediments, again, and having a broader housing plan is part of that as well. So this will guide some of their work as well. Mm-hmm.
I generally join Josh that you don't want plans to sit on a shelf. Like, is there a way where you could look at this and say, these are 4-6 action items that the city should be in the lead in and report back to us in 6 months or when we do the budget, just to make sure it's in there? There are a couple things in there, trading out a rental certificate for education and other things that, like, if we knew what it was that we thought were really the city's leadership and we track that might be a good way to keep us in the loop.
Yeah,
Yeah, can I comment on that? So there is an element of it every year where the reason it's joined with the consolidated plan is because there's an element of reporting annually where there's a section of the consolidated annual performance evaluation report, the CAPER, that you see every spring, where we do have to identify the status of what we've done in the last year to affirmatively further fair housing for our plan. So it seems like it would make a lot of sense when we present the CAPER, which is every March, that would be a good time to also maybe do updates on this, because that's sort of the alignment in this whole process. So if that seems fair, we could do it that way. And in the plan, it also does identify which ones the city does take the lead on versus partners versus, if Polk County is going to do something that doesn't really make sense for the city to do. There are sections in the plan that do identify that. So it would be very easy to just pull up our implementation plan and say, here's where we made progress.
So
Yeah.
basically, it's an update to what we're voting on.
Yep, exactly.
So how does this fit in with, so West Des Moines was part of it, Polk County's part of it. How about all the other communities?
Well,
What regional work has been done to get them all involved?
So the analysis of impediments, the guidelines from HUD do highly recommend a regional view, whether we have that actual political authority or not to reach over those lines. So reporting out trends in other areas. We heard that loudly when we were doing our public outreach to different stakeholders, to the community, that they wanted to see more public outreach happen regionally. A lot of the goals were actually inspired by what we heard directly from stakeholder service agencies, nonprofits, and individuals in the community. And so with those, I think we want to work toward improving some of those things that we heard.
So in this report, we only had West Des Moines volunteer to join and Polk County.
They are, West Des Moines received CDBG funds,
So whoever gets,
and then Polk County recently became a
Entitlement.
or yes. And so,
Okay, through
yeah, so it
so
is,
they're
so this document is,
for these three entities.
yes,
Okay.
because of that federal fund.
Right. But for example, there was some regional analysis. I thought one of the most interesting pieces, there was the low-income housing tax credit graph that looked at the absolute number of low-income housing tax credit projects developed over, I think it was 2019 to 2023. We were second in the absolute number, but I think of the communities that had it, we probably would have been 11th from a per capita basis in terms of new low-income housing tax credit units. It wasn't presented in the per capita way, but just doing a rough look at what was presented on the absolute number.
Of new housing, but what is the current
New
housing?
low-income housing tax credit.
But
Right.
have we looked at the current, I mean, is there a study done of the region of current housing based on the affordability of where you could purchase or where you can live in number of units? Did this encompass that?
That will be for the city of Des Moines, that will be an effort that is done under the comprehensive housing strategy
Right, the
that's
new
currently
one.
going
Okay.
on now, that for the city of Des Moines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Thank you very much.
Hi, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me. So I'm going to continue the presentation on the HUD programming. Similar to the analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, every 5 years, as a stipulation of receiving these entitlement funds through HUD each year, you're required to essentially take a pause in your programming, evaluate the needs of the community, and reestablish or reaffirm potentially your priorities and goals for how you will utilize the 3 annual grants that you receive from HUD. I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
You can introduce yourself. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Eric Chatham with Civitas, consultant. Sorry, thought Jody had done that. Yeah, so we've been working with the city for about 6 months now, maybe a little longer, on developing this consolidated plan. Big hold up here is, of course, waiting on the federal budget. So you'll see in our projections, we're relying on the 2024 allocations, hoping that they will be relatively similar allocations. But at this point, we're still very much waiting on Congress and the president to pass a budget. So overall, the primary goals here with the CDBG, home, and ESG programs, which I'll cover each of those in a moment. 3 overarching goals from HUD established in the regulations for these programs. Number 1, to provide for decent, safe, and affordable housing. Provide for suitable living environments. That's the entire jurisdiction, not just in the residential setting. And to expand economic opportunities. These are original priorities, if you will, of the CDBG program. We're now in the 50th year of the CDBG program federally. So these are sort of longstanding practices, if you will, for the CDBG program. So you have your 3 grants there on the screen. These are the 3 that the city receives as part of the annual entitlement program. We don't necessarily apply for these. These are not competitive applications. And quite frankly, we don't have much impact on how much we actually receive in funding. There's a formula process established in the regulations from each of these programs. Largely, the number one factor in those formulas is the population of the city, but there's a certain amount of funding that goes to each state and then to entitlement communities. So it's a little more complicated than just straight population. There's poverty rates in there, unemployment rates, housing conditions, et cetera, included. CDBG is, of course, your largest grant, your most flexible grant. You're able to use that for public facilities and infrastructure, community services, housing, rehabilitation. You can't use these funds, unfortunately, for the construction of new housing, but you can use the funds to acquire sites, working with nonprofit groups, land trust, et cetera, to acquire sites, improve sites, and then help with the eventual development. The home program is your second largest grant. That's where you're able to use funds for construction of housing, as well as rehab of housing and financial assistance to both first-time homebuyers and renters potentially. And then the Emergency Solutions Grant, or ESG, is your smallest grant, most restrictive funds. This is for addressing homelessness, to either assist families and individuals that might be currently experiencing homelessness with either helping them into a shelter temporarily or helping them to get rehoused in affordable housing. And on the other side, we hope to address homelessness prior to families and individuals experiencing it. So homeless prevention as well in street outreach. So again, based on your 2024 allocations on the screen, here's what we're projecting for the year. Again, CDBG being the largest, your current allocation, $3.7 million. The home program, just over $900,000, and again, that ESG program, much smaller at the federal level, and that pans down through the formula, much smaller and more restrictive funds.
How much of those dollars do you use for the homeless prevention efforts? The $328,000.
I'll break down that budget, but we actually haven't established the 2025 specific breakdown for ESG just yet. So the consolidated plan has 5 major components. That needs assessment is where my team largely helps city staff gather demographic and housing type information about the city of Des Moines. The housing market analysis, to the mayor's question a moment ago, we looked at the housing stock and condition of housing, similar to the analysis of impediments. So those two plans sort of fed into each other. And again, knowing that there's further, more deep dive into housing study coming up. With the needs assessment and the market analysis and feedback from stakeholders and residents, and of course staff's input, understanding of programs and the demand for programs, we established a 5-year strategic plan. And this is really the most important aspect of the consolidated plan, where we establish priorities and goals for how we'll use these funds over the next 5-year period. This should dictate what the city will decide to fund each year. As you saw on the previous screens, you've got a lot of flexibility, certainly with CDBG, a little less on home and ESG, but you have a lot of flexibility on what you decide to fund. HUD doesn't get to tell you what you do or do not fund, as long as it's in the eligible categories. So then it's for the city to determine what's the highest and best use, given other funding sources that you might have, other funding programs, and then, of course, establishing your own priorities.
Can you use CDBG funds in the ESG category also?
Yeah, yes, sir, absolutely. CDBG is the most flexible that it can do all the things we listed under ESG, shelters, outreach services, rental assistance, whether it's helping someone stay in their house or getting back into a house. Yes, all of that is eligible. CDBG puts a limit on those types of programs to only 3 months of assistance, where ESG typically can go at least 24 months. And then during COVID, we got extensions even to go longer. So a little more intense services and rental assistance through ESG. So through this process, my team engaged with City, as I mentioned, several months ago to begin the data collection and analysis. We had 2 surveys that we put out early in the spring, one for the community and one for stakeholders. And I should be clear here, this is only for the city of Des Moines, right? The other entitlement communities are required to come up with their own consolidated plan. So this is all strictly geared towards city. we did have some overlap working with West Des Moines, but our results that I'm sharing is specifically for City of Des Moines.
So will we coordinate with Polk County and West Des Moines as we go through our plan and we all kind of work together, or is just
On the analysis of impediments, you may, and from a regional planning perspective, you're encouraged to, but you're only allowed to utilize these funds within the city.
Yeah, I understand. But are we going to collaborate with them to make sure we're all on the same page and the same
Well,
goals, or?
I wouldn't guarantee that.
Okay.
We will work with them. Understand that the new Polk County entitlement is based on non-Des Moines population. And so they will be focused on non-Des Moines areas, whereas obviously ours is within the,
So will they only be focused on incorporated Polk County or the entire region? That
It should
doesn't
be
include
it should be the unincorporated,
So the unincorporated,
and then
and then the non-entitlement cities would
That's
be
right.
not West Des Moines, not Des Moines.
that's right.
but all the other cities. Okay.
Well, all of the others have the opportunity to opt into the county's status. If they choose to accept into, then they are effectively follow how the county sets up their programs. If they opt out, then they rely, as they would have currently, prior to Polk County, they rely on the state to
Do
provide
you
that
know how
pass-through.
many have opted in?
I couldn't speak to that, no, sir.
That might be something I'd like to know later in the conversation.
Right, 50,000 is the minimum population for CDBG.
Well, I mean, that could be just being.
Understood, sir. So we hosted a series of outreach with both community and stakeholders throughout the spring, and have now that the plan is established, following today, we'll be posting it for a public comment, and you'll have 2 public hearings later this month and in December. So we had a very good response on the community survey. You see here over 1,900 responses, the 3 main categories. Again, keeping in mind we were guiding these questions towards eligible uses, right? But the number 1 response overwhelmingly is all things affordable housing, new affordable housing, as was just discussed, being the top priority, if you will. Again, unfortunately, CDBG, our largest source of funds for these programs, we can't do new construction of housing. So we're right off the bat limited on what we can fund. We can certainly support that, again, with acquisition, with planning, with infrastructure improvements, et cetera. But we can't literally go vertical with our CDBG funds, unfortunately. Public services being the second main category, supportive services, both for homeless, but also other larger, if you will, realm of special needs population. On the CDBG program, we're limited to only 15% of our annual allocation going to public services. So our 2 biggest needs, if you will, as identified by the public, are significantly limited by the regulations of the program itself. And then finally, third is public improvements, which you'll see when I get to the allocation or the recommended funding. We're heavily weighted CDBG into public improvements because that's our biggest use, if you will. So while it's our 3rd priority, it for CDBG winds up being our largest funding category. And then breakdown on the right-hand side, more details about the affordable housing, but clearly new affordable housing for both ownership and rental are our top priorities. So with the feedback from the community, from stakeholders, with the data collected and review with staff, we've identified the 5 priority needs on the left-hand side. And then more specifically, sorry, I'm hitting this button too hard. There's the associated goals on the right-hand side. As was mentioned in the previous presentation, at the end of each of these program years, the city is required to publish a performance report, referred to as the CAPER, where you will suggest how what you accomplished in the preceding year towards achieving these goals and priorities. Each year, as the city receives additional funding, you'll establish an annual action plan, which will be essentially that year's specific budget. In that budget, you'll identify particular goal outcomes. So, for example, on owner housing rehab, I understand in the last couple of years, you've done just over 20 housing rehabs. So each year in the action plan, you'll be a little bit more specific. This year, we're setting aside a certain amount of money, and we'd hope to rehab 10 units, 20 units, whatever that might be. So the consolidated plan sets the high levels for the priorities and the goals, and then the annual action plan sets the specific outcomes and budgets. So again, this is our recommended funding based on 2024 allocation. If it would, just simply flat funding. So these numbers would adjust based on the actual allocation. What we'd like to suggest is that these essentially would be percentages. So administration, you're allowed to take up to 20%. Public services, you're allowed to take up to 15%. So as the budget is announced early in 2025, we would come back and adjust these numbers based on percentage allocations. And the largest funding category for CDBG is public facilities and infrastructure, as it is in most places. Housing rehab, public services, code enforcement being the largest activity overall, and then administration.
What is the limitation? You mentioned a few percentages of how much we can fund for each one of these. Can you give us a detail of what that is?
Yes, sir. So you only have two caps in the home, or I'm sorry, in the CDBG program. Administration, which is 20%, and public services 15%. Those are your only two caps, and then you're just not allowed to at all with any amount of money do new construction. There are very, very specific caveats to being able to do CDBG new construction. It usually involves tearing down housing and then building right back up or replacement one-for-one housing.
So we're, on the CDBG, we're hitting the 20% administration cap. And
Yes,
then
sir.
how much of
And-
our,
and the CDBG admin, to your point a moment ago, sir, CDBG admin can also be used to cover home and ESG, where you only get 10% and 7.5% for admin, respectively. So it's intended to be the larger funded source overall, and then the admin budget is intended to fund the administration, at least partially, of those other two programs as well.
And so the 748 does fund those other.
At least partially. I can't speak to how it's broken down staff payments, but yes, sir, it's allowed to cover.
right, and that's just covering our staff.
Right. Conducting analysis of impediments, contributions into larger housing studies, all of those things are eligible as part of CDBG administrative efforts.
Yeah.
What are examples of public services?
Yeah, so public services and the homeless side could be additional rental support. That's considered a service, even though we would think of it as financial assistance under CDBG. That rental assistance that you might do with CDBG would be a service. But most of your public services are often social service type programs run by nonprofits that you fund them for a small grant and then they run their program. So you're helping them support programming.
So if you go back a couple slides, I believe to your question right there where it says public services.
Yep.
So it's all of them in number 2, correct? Is that how I'm?
And the list, it's a very extensive. This is actually the most flexible activity type, but then we're limited on 15%.
Right.
So yes, in the analysis of impediments, some of those recommendations about more landlord training, about more fair housing and first-time homebuyer counseling, all of those programs could be eligible under public service category.
And that 15% is a federal guideline.
That's
correct?
it. Yeah. And there's not even a waiver, an ability to ask for a waiver currently.
Okay.
I mean,
Thank you.
we got one during COVID, but
Question.
not normally.
Just for clarification, when Impact had their rental assistance program, was that using some of these funds? That was separate, a different program? Those are federal funds, okay.
Well, both. So initially, sorry, Lisa Krabs, Federal Funds Administrator. Initially, what happened with Impact when COVID hit, we did use a small portion of the COVID CDBG funds for the rental assistance. That was about $500,000. And then what happened, the U.S. Treasury kicked in that like millions of dollars. And so that also went to Impact. So it was a combination.
But that money's all gone now.
Basically, yeah. Yep. Well, okay, so the city of Des Moines and Polk County both got allocations. The city of Des Moines allocation has been gone for a couple of years. Polk County is still administering because they went back and requested more. Yep. That I don't know.
I mean, Impact has that. I mean, Impact is winding down.
Yeah, they're winding.
If there are dollars left, it's like the last.
Well, and
I
the
don't
county
think they have
withheld
any
some.
money left.
Well, there is, but I believe it's the county withheld some for potential construction. There was a portion that did not have to go to rent subsidies.
Yeah,
as well.
of the second tranche of that emergency rental assistance,
So
to
they're
your
looking-
point, sir.
So is that the single-family homes that they're
Yes,
building on
because
the
they
lots
have,
that we
I believe, until the end of next
Oh,
year to get
okay.
that spent. So they're in the process right now.
That's correct. At the end of September 25, all those funds have to be exhausted around the country.
I just have a question on our code enforcement. How much of our total code enforcement budget is funded through CDBG with that 1.5 million?
That number, unless there's significant dollars.
Chris has got that look.
Yeah.
He's trying to think which number.
I'll definitely get back to you on the percentage. I know this goes back decades when we first started funding this, and it was close to 75% at the time. But I'll get you the updated percentage.
Yep, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
The code enforcement that you fund with CDBG is just to add to that, can only be used for efforts in low mod neighborhoods. So if you got code enforcement in the entirety of the city, you got to be paying for some of it with some other dollars. So just a quick example here of a recent housing rehab, turning an older derelict home into, very nice looking affordable property. So again, CDBG and home can be used for housing rehab, very popular programs, picking up steam, so to speak, in the city. The home program, certainly far fewer eligible use categories, so affordable housing development being the largest category. Then the second category there, the CHDO, you see it acronym at the bottom, Community Housing Development Organizations. These are nonprofit affordable housing developers working here in Des Moines. We're required to set aside 15% of our annual allocation for these types of groups to then go do affordable rental development. They can partner with for-profits. You mentioned tax credit deals earlier. They can partner in on those projects, so it doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing a very tiny, small 1 or 2 unit property or project. They can be involved in very large, robust programs, but we do have to set aside 15%. So again, the overwhelming majority of the funds is set aside here for development of housing, whether that's through for-profit or a combination of nonprofits. And then we're capped at 10% of this allocation for administration.
And what do you consider affordable then? What is it? What AMI is that?
Well, affordable should be that everybody is, or that the tenants are not paying more than 30% of their income towards housing. As a housing analyst, I would argue you need affordable housing at all income ranges, because you're over the median and you're making 150% of the median income, if you're paying 40% of your housing or your income towards housing, it's not affordable. So we really need affordable housing stock at all income categories and all housing types, renter and owner. What we're funding with CDBG and home, though, is targeted to households at 50%, or I'm sorry, at 80% of the area median income and below. And sorry, I think there must be transition in here. And then on home, when we do rental, we're required to have initial rent targeting at 60% AMI. So when we're doing multifamily, as in the picture here, this apartment complex, the units we funded with home at least initially targeted at least 60% AMI, if not lower. And then no more than 30% of their income. So those are very low rents when you get to that income, and then no more than 30%.
So it would be helpful for me, I don't know about others, knowing what 80% AMI, 60%, what the income is and how we, yeah.
We have that chart, and it's,
Is it in?
but it's not in this presentation. It was in our public presentations that we did, and HUD updates that every spring. And with our home program, they update the rent limits and the income limits across all of those percentages. So we definitely.
So each year, I don't know, maybe Chris or Scott, somebody can email us that criteria? So at least I know you get asked that question probably every time we do a project. So it'd be nice if we had it.
I think it's people think when you hear affordable or AMI that they might fall in that category once they hear the salary
Right.
in many cases. So I think that's why
Well,
I've always asked.
We'll
'Cause
share that.
instead of 80% in the AMI, it really doesn't mean anything to anybody. I want to know if I make this much, this is what I call it, where I fall in the bracket. I think it's a lot more
How many
helpful.
people in the household with that?
Yeah, right. They have those charts.
So it'd be nice.
Just for a quick reference, we looked this up the other day. For a family of 4, it's 113,000, I think, is median income. So, I mean, that's a good salary for 4 people, right? So 80% of that, I can't do the math quickly, but
82. More than 80.
right? So yeah,
what's
but
the
we can get the
average?
chart.
The average salary of Des Moines metro area is how much?
113.
Is the one, that's the average?
Yeah,
Okay.
for
I think it was-
4 people.
For 4 people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let's be careful. I'm always very careful when I talk about incomes in public that it's median, meaning half make more, half make less. It's not average because the average could really skew things. So half the households make more, half the households make less than the median. And one of the gentlemen mentioned, it's adjusted for household size, of course. So 80% of the median really means just more than half of the households in our community make more than you. And again, that's a pretty strong income, $80,000 for a household of 4. So this is not poverty level housing we're talking about specifically.
And I sent it to you just now.
Yeah, certainly when you compare that to average incomes of certain service type work, you start to see who's in those categories.
Well, I just think it's helpful for all of us to know as we're out talking to neighbors and they see projects coming into their neighborhood that we can explain to them, this is the median income, this is what, that would be helpful.
And again, in your AI, you're trying to deconcentrate concentrations of poverty. So you don't want to have a large apartment complex with nothing but 30% AMI households, right? You want 30, 60, 80, maybe some 120 in there if it's got some different funding sources. You don't want to concentrate because then you get an area that needs more services, programming, support, etc. So these programs go hand in hand. So our next steps, the biggest next step is we're waiting for Congress and the President to sign a budget. I'll stay out of politics, but that's our biggest next step is waiting to actually get an allocation so we can implement. But presuming that will come eventually, our next steps will be a public comment period starting here in a couple weeks, and then public hearings in front of council. Once HUD announces the allocations and we have completed our public hearing and comment period, we'll be ready to submit shortly thereafter, adjusting for any changes to the budget. Currently, the THUD bill is where these funds are found, and they are at the federal level, flat funded, currently in the budget discussions. So we're pretty safe, but they haven't finished negotiations, and obviously tomorrow could change things. So we'll leave it at that. It did. Well, yeah, I can't speak to that, to be honest with you, sir. Right. And if, off the record, the last time we had a presidential change, Congress passed the budget just 2 weeks after the election with basically no further argument. It was quite surprising. So if that happens again, we might have a budget just real quick before Thanksgiving, and no big deal. Wow. Who knows? And of course, Ryan has been our point of contact here for the consolidated plan, so everyone in the public has been directed to provide any further feedback or comment to Ryan's contact there. Happy to answer any other questions, but thank you for your time and happy to be here with you this morning.
If there's no other questions, I think this time, since have another presentation, if anybody has questions, Ryan's contact is on the sheet, so get in touch with Ryan with any other questions, and we'll have more time with the public hearings. So, next one.
All right, I'll bring up our speakers for the annual police reporting document. I don't know, Brian, are you leading or Major Miller?
Sergeant O'Donnell was going to lead, but I'll do a quick introduction.
Thank you.
Are you ready for us to start?
Yeah, let me first say I really appreciate the collaboration that's gone on between the police department, our new police IT, and our traditional IT. So you've got Jeff here with IT, Brian with our public safety IT, and then Major Lily with the police department, and Sergeant, right, Brian? So kick it off.
Mayor, City Manager, council people, council members, Jeff Lester. I am Lily Parker, and I am over our Executive Projects Division with the Police Department. I am actually going to turn this over to Sergeant Brian O'Donnell, who is our CALEA manager. We have done some tremendous work in the Police Department, thanking you for the data analysts that you've given and provided us. Sergeant O'Donnell has done layman's labor and work with our public safety IT team, and so just want to turn it over to him so that we can present to you our annual report.
Thank you, Major. Good morning, Mayor, City Manager, council members. As Major Parker stated, we're going to talk about the annual report today for the Des Moines Police Department. This is the 2023. This is just a statistical report. It's a more robust statistical report than what we've previously had in the past. This is not to supplant any other reports that we currently have in place. This is not a programming report. That'll be something that'll come out in the spring of next year. But again, this is just something that we've been wanting to put out to be more transparent with the public, to provide data that's often asked of us, so that way the public has easy access to this data in a very digestible manner. So first, I want to be able to recognize the team. I know Major Parker introduced some of the team here, but I have the privilege of presenting this information, but all the work happens behind me here. Major Parker, with her leadership in progressing the initiatives with the Public Works LLC recommendations, as well as the 21 CP, and then our pursuit through accreditation. And then, of course, Chief McTaggart has made it an initiative with the data transparency that Chief Wingert has started in years past. Our data analyst, Ben Steven, he was the one that was able to clean up all this data and really push to make sure this data was accurate and gather it in a way that we can analyze it. And then, of course, Brian Freeman's team with the public safety technology, him, Joe Walters, and Domindu Jayasekara. Am I saying that right? They also have been instrumental in making sure this data is in a way that it's accessible to the public and that it's accurate. I also want to recognize Peter Zamansky. He was instrumental in putting together this in a very visually appeasing way. As you may or may not recall, our previous statistical report was a 2-page document that we put out into the Always program that came out every year. So with the internal help with Peter and the communications office, we were able to put out something more robust at a significant cost savings to the city. Because our previous reports were sent out third party to be published. So as stated, Chief Wingert and the Des Moines Police Department were committed to that data transparency. We want to strengthen that community trust with the public, and this data is meant for us to be able to provide a strategic vision for the Des Moines Police Department. And then the recent initiatives, as I stated, with the Public Works LLC report, as well as the 21 CP report, those initiatives have really broadened our data collection methods, enhanced the data analysis, and it's produced the methods of data delivery for public consumption, as you'll be able to see in this annual report. So since 2022, as you all remember, in April of 22, we had the Public Works report, and there were some very specific initiatives that they laid out. First of all, data collection on all stops. That was one of the main recommendations they made. There's 3 very specific recommendations that was included in that, and that's what this statistical report was meant to encompass as well. In October of 22, I think it was October 19th of 2022, we began collecting data on all traffic stops that whether it be through citation or through an electronic warning. So now we can collect and analyze any traffic stop, the demographics on each traffic stop as well. The statistical report also includes the expansion of the crime and offense data, something that we've been working towards through the new Tyler program that came out in 22, our records management system, and then analyzing the stop data for the annual report, which you will see in that report there. Our goal again in the spring of 25 to have a comprehensive annual state of policing report, so that'll include the programming that's going on within the Des Moines Police Department, and again, something more robust that we can present to the public to meet the recommendation of Public Works LLC. And then also develop an interactive open data portal. That's something that the Public Safety Technology team, headed by Brian Freeman, is currently working on, again, just to add that layer of transparency to the public. Also the 21 CP recommendations as well, again, pushing for data transparency, and then some things that we're required to do through CALIA as well. So CALIA is very specific in some of the analysis that we do on some of our data metrics, and so that push through CALIA and those recommendations is what's been able to drive this initiative. So again, this was a combined effort. Community stakeholders, the public not only requests but demands this data from us, and we want to be transparent in the way that we present it. But with the help of the assessors, with 21 CP, Public Works LLC, as well as CALIA, taking their recommendations and best practices, being able to identify the data that's important and analyze that data. It takes the efforts of department personnel. We have officers on the street that are collecting this data on a daily basis and ensuring that they know how to accurately collect that data so it can be presented in a way that's accurate as well. There'll be training in this upcoming in-service in January and February of this year to identify some of the hurdles that we're still coming over with data in the data collection process. So officers are made aware of that as well to improve that data collection. And then the external support that we're getting, not only with other city departments like the communications office, but also with our technology vendors like Tyler, making sure that the platform and the products that we need are able to produce this data for the public. So I know I already introduced the Public Safety Technology team, but it's headed by Brian Freeman and then Joe and Domingo under them. They have been very instrumental in it's not just this annual report here that you're seeing, the things that we're having to do for CALIA. Every year, once we become accredited, so beginning next year, CALIA requires us to produce a report, or there's specific metrics that we have to turn over to CALIA, and they produce a report on the department. And being able to collect those metrics and making sure that they were accurate, the Public Safety Technology team has already built a program that's now where we were collecting data in various platforms where we did have the data, but maybe it couldn't talk to each other. They've been able to implement some of these things, and now we can analyze data sets that we haven't been able to analyze before. So they're driving improvements in the ability for us to capture, curate, and standardize that data quality, and then just building that central enterprise for data analytics. So the goals of this report is just to, again, offer insights into the department, but also strengthen that trust and relationship between the department and the community, but then also provide that strategic vision for the department going forward. Keep in mind, this is just one part of our story. Again, this is not to supplant any of the other reports that we have going out on an annual basis. But also a reminder to the public that the public does have access to real-time crime information with the Des Moines Police Department, the law enforcement report map that came out last year. Any citizen can go out there. They can pull data based on metrics that they feel is important to them. They can look up cases by a specific crime, by a specific neighborhood. So that information is still available to the public. Again, this statistical report is just an added layer of that transparency.
Just a quick, well, two questions.
Yes, sir.
One, could someone share with council members how to get to this portion? Is this on the city website or is it separate from?
It's actually on the departmental website.
Okay.
And there's actually a YouTube video that Paul Prezik put together, Sergeant Prezik, that actually, it's about a 5 or 6 minute video, I think,
Okay.
that lays out pretty well how to use it if individuals want to categorize or filter out specific crimes certain ways. But it is available on the Des Moines Police Department website.
Maybe refresh us with a link on how to get to that, because I had a question at one of the neighborhood meetings.
Sure.
And second question, seems like there was an issue with police officers needing to guess the ethnicity of on a stop because there's the driver's license code doesn't provide that information. Is that still a hurdle that?
Yes, that is. So ethnicity is not listed on driver's license, and race as well. So they stopped, I can't remember what year, but at some point in the last 10 or 15 years, that was not listed on a driver's license. So citizens are going and getting, and now if you had a previous license that listed it, it may not list it on the front of the driver's license, but in the database that we run, it might still produce that. So there is still a percentage of driver's license where we'll have that data. But for individuals who might be moving to the state or becoming of an age where they're getting their ID for the first time, that information is not produced on a driver's license. So that does become a hurdle for us because we're in a situation where we may stop an individual and we don't know their race or ethnicity. For obvious purposes, in some situations, we may not get to a point where we ever ask that information. So the standard practice is that based on best judgment that we identify that race or ethnicity, but having a way to make sure that data is accurate. That's why we encourage citizens to place their race on their driver's license. So when we collect that data, we can make sure the data we're collecting is accurate.
Well, I'm not sure if I grasp all that. So it's optional for an individual to put that on their driver's license?
It's not even a requirement anymore. It's not even asked anymore. Again, in the past, it used to be. So like when I got my license when I was 16 years old, I identified myself as a white male. So now in the DOT database, if an officer were to run my license, that data would still pull over. It's not listed on the driver's license, but that data would still be in the database.
Okay, so for a portion of the population, that information is available to the officer.
That's correct, yes.
And this is up to the state, right, to put that back on?
That's correct. That's a DOT initiative, yes.
Are we trying to work?
They tried, I think.
Yeah, that's
Statewide,
still a
is that one of our-
legislative objective.
Is that a legislative or is it Iowa DOT?
So I had that conversation with the DOT director 4 or 5 years ago. The director actually has the authority to make that change, but is not willing to do so until they have legislative backing and votes.
Okay. Is this one of our goals for the upcoming?
It remains one of our goals. Yes.
I mean, we can't be the only police department that would like this information.
We are not the only ones that would like it, but there are quite a few that don't want it. We'll leave it at that for legislative discussions.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
So going into the report, I think everybody does have hard copies of the report. We'll kind of walk through some of the key metrics on this. The first one being the calls for service. So every year for the last 5 years, we've seen the call for services go up, which is always a struggle when we're trying to identify staffing levels. The public safety technology team was able to build this heat map of calls for services, which not only helps the police department identify when it comes to staffing levels, shifts, days off. We can see the highest calls for services based on time of day, based on hour. But I think also by the public having this data, it also lays out the expectations for them as well. We see that the highest time for call for service is midweek, between the 4 to 5 p.m. period, where citizens are coming home for the day, maybe involved in an accident on the way home. Maybe they're coming home and realizing that their house was burglarized. Maybe they're something they put off at work. They're calling the police for a non-emergency report. So again, this kind of lays out that expectation to the public to understand that maybe if there is a delay for non-emergent reports at 4 to 5 p.m., that there's an understanding that this is one of the busiest times of day for us. I don't want to skip over too much, but on page 2, you'll see the Mobile Crisis and Care Team program. I know Sergeant Garcia gave a presentation here a few weeks ago, and she went in deep detail about her programming. A very important statistic. So what you guys saw was based on the fiscal year 2024 data. What is laid out in the report is based on 2023 data. So the numbers are a little bit different, but the statistics and the goals that they have are the same. In the property and evidence collection, we try to, from a space consideration, the amount of property that we bring in, we want to make sure that we're disposing it accordingly as well to prevent the added space that's required. So that's included on page 2 as well. As we go into the traffic data on page 3, you'll see the high-level statistics there. Again, this is data that we weren't able to fully and accurately capture because we didn't have data on every traffic stop, which we now can collect. So as you see the breakdown of the traffic data, we have it broken down by race, ethnicity, and gender, both the traffic tickets as well as the traffic warnings. So those are all broken down there for the public as well. And then on page 4 goes into the ATE data. There's a full report that the department has on the ATE data that gets sent to the DOT. So again, this is not to supplant that, but just to provide the high-level view of the ATE data for the police department. This is the citation yearly analysis. So again, you can see from 2019 to 2023, there was kind of a downward trend, but overall pretty steady on the citations. But what's interesting, now we have 2023 data showing the 7,693 warnings that were written. So you can see that the warnings have not altered the enforcement, but it just gives the officers another tool for safety compliance to the rules of the road. And then, as I stated before, it allows for that method to track important demographics of every traffic stop. So now we can go in and start to do the analysis of that. Yes, sir.
Do we have a sense? I mean, we know how many warnings were issued in 2023. Do we think that there were a similar number of traffic stops that didn't result in citations in the previous years? Or, I mean, so we know the citations are relatively constant, but
right.
But do we know if it had any impact on the number of overall stops?
So we had last quarter data from 22, and that was tracking with about the same of each quarter for 23 as well. So we can see that it appears once the new chief's order went into effect as far as requiring the written warnings, it did not seem to impact the number of traffic stops that was occurring. We can also go back and look at CAD data to be able to show the number of traffic stops as well. So we know there was approximately 12,000 traffic stops last year, even though it resulted in more than, because a traffic stop might result in more than one warning or one citation. So that's why you would see approximately 19,000 violations, but that was due to 12,000 traffic stops, where more than one violation would have occurred at each stop.
Right. Okay. So the tickets, there tend to be, so there's like, it's not individual traffic stop. Like someone could be getting 2 or 3 citations.
Correct.
At a stop. So for example, in that traffic ticket where there are 11,406, we know how many individuals stops that was then?
So yes, we do know by CAD data how many individual stops there are. Now with what we're trying to integrate with the data cleanup would be able to, the goal would be to be able to filter that out to see, okay, here's the number of traffic stops and here's the demographics based on that specifically. As you stated, this would be based on the demographics of each individual citation or warning. We can also correlate that to the number of traffic stops of just over 12,000 for the year. But through that programming and software data that we're trying to build through the public safety technology team, being able to filter that out would be the next goal.
Right. So, I mean, so we can basically say that the average citation, so there are more traffic stops that result in warning because the warning, you only issue one warning, right? Or could you issue multiple?
You could issue
warnings?
multiple. And that kind of, I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump ahead. I was going to, it kind of explains the next.
If it's better explained somewhere else, great.
So that does kind of segue into the next one. So this is the top citations and warnings. So you'll see the enforcement on speeding is our largest enforcement when it comes to citations. But you might have a secondary offense such as no registration that might result in a verbal, not a verbal, but like a written warning. So that's where you kind of see these are our top violations, but it's not always proportional as far as citations to warnings, because some of the offenses that might be equipment offenses or secondary offenses might be handled through a written warning. Exactly, it's not one-to-one. That's correct. Yes, sir.
Equivalent number.
Yes, there's a proportionality to stops to citations, correct. But it's not one-to-one. Sure.
Understand in the future.
Yeah.
We keep working.
Moving into the arrest data. So again, this is information that we've always produced, but it has not been broken down into the statistical report. So not only the number of arrests, but then also breaking it out similarly to the traffics and the warnings, but by race, by ethnicity, and by gender. Then rolling to page 6 to tie on to the arrest data. This is the crimes cleared in 2023. So these are the what we call Part 1 and Part 2 crimes as tracked by the FBI statistics. And then we produce what we would call our clearance rate. So whether a case is cleared through arrest or through some other exceptional means. And as you'll see that the Des Moines Police Department continues to be much higher than the national average when we talk about crime clearance rates. So anywhere from, I believe, 8% above the national average all the way up to 50% above the national average when we're talking about crime clearance. So again, just goes to show the dedication of the officers and personnel at the Des Moines Police Department and ensuring that the citizens of Des Moines are receiving the justice if they are a victim of a crime. And then the last page goes into the drugs seized in 2023. Again, this is something we've always produced with the statistical report. One of the things we continue to see an increase in is the seizure of fentanyl, which is why I produced the Narcan data. The Narcan data is not part of the 2023 statistical report only because the administration of Narcan did not begin until March of 23. So we didn't have a full year of data, but we can start to see between the end of 23 and between the first part of 24 what the trends are looking like as far as the use of Narcan. We have it broken out by gender, by age, and then whether they're an adult or a juvenile, and then also the success rate. So we have found that officers administering Narcan to individuals during an overdose have over a 90% success rate at reviving that individual before they're transported to the hospital. So again, something that the officers have been carrying since March of last year, and we can show the success that's being created because of that. Peter Zemansky, again, has been a huge help in this process as well. And, he's made this easily available on our website. So the 2023 annual report, there will be a link on the very front homepage. So as soon as you go to the Des Moines Police Department homepage, there'll be a button there where you can click on it, and then it'll take you directly to the electronic version of what you see in front of you. So looking ahead, as I stated in the spring of 25, the goal is to have a more comprehensive annual state of policing report for 2024 data, and that's in accordance with the Public Works LLC recommendations. Also, again, the goal is by next summer that we'll have our CLIA accreditation, at least have the on-site visit, and then go in front of the commission in fall of next year. But as part of the on-site visit, we have to produce many of these metrics to CLIA, and then they will produce a report through the what we call SIMMers, or the CLIA Information Management Reporting System. So there'll be an annual report of that being pushed out as well next year. Justice Counts, we've had meetings with Justice Counts. Major Parker, Brian Freeman has headed up these several meetings with Justice Counts, and met to see what they have to offer, the dashboard, another layer of transparency as well. Chief McTaggart last week has advised that we're going to opt into that as well. So that'll be another layer of transparency. It's through a federally grant-funded program where individuals can go out to the Justice Counts website, look at how the Des Moines Police Department is doing based on our metrics that's provided. And then the neat thing about that as well is other agencies that are opting in, which there are several in the metro, including the Polk County Attorney's Office. We can see how we compare, and then there'll be some feedback loops as far as like with the County Attorney's Office to see what is their priorities as far as cases that they're prosecuting, and how does that compare to what the cases we're investigating, arresting, and should our resources be allocated differently. So again, another great a transparency tool that that dashboard is expected to open in early of next year. Again, the open data portal that the Public Safety Technology team for public access, another initiative that they're working on. And then again, the continued compilation of very topic specific reports. We still have our use of force report, our pursuit report, the ATE data. So again, this is just a high level view of all the stuff that's going on. But we'll continue to push out those very specific topic specific reports. And then the goal is to move forward with a deeper analysis of this crime specifics, trends, getting more granular in neighborhoods, and trying to identify what resources do we need to allocate from the Des Moines Police Department into these areas, and working our partners within the city help out as well.
What about the new app that the Des Moines Police has? That's really an awesome tool.
It really is, and I don't know, I have the app and I see all the updates that Sergeant Parizek puts out. And I've spoken to Sergeant Parizek about this annual report as well. So I imagine it'll be something that he'll push out through that as well. I don't know if I'm not as familiar with the app as far as the creation part of it, if there's like a dashboard that he can actually add that in as well.
It's a very nice app.
It is. And a great way to push out data to the public. Just that, again, that added layer of transparency. Any questions?
Any questions? Does anyone have? If not, thank you for the
Thank you, Mayor.
information, and I look forward to additional reports. And I want to thank the team for really moving this forward and doing what a lot of our residents in this council have asked for. So I appreciate all the work that's going into it, because it's not always as easy as just say, oh, put it up there, put out that report. So I appreciate the work that's been done.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's our last item, so we will reconvene with our regular meeting at 5 p.m. What was that? Oh, sorry, 4:55. Get that 5 minutes in, be here like for the Housing Authority information that we'll be voting on. So thank you again for all being here and taking the time to hear about what's going on in our city.